Here's Tony with a new Toyota Celica.
It's hard to believe, but this beautiful new Celica seems to have become the object of bitter controversy. It all has to do with the way Toyota has styled it, and people seem to have formed themselves into unyielding for or against camps. Apparently, you either love this car or you hate it. Having seen the car for the first time at the Frankfurt Auto Show and disliked it, I must say that I've now got to like it a lot. I've walked around the car time and time again, and I just can't understand why anybody could object to the styling. To me, it's a fluid and original effort, and certainly gets its share of admiring glances. Even so, one auto writer described it as looking as though it had melted in the sun like one of Salvador Dali's watches. We often criticize Japanese makers for bland and unexciting designs, so I'm going to give Toyota all the encouragement I can for this one. My only complaint is that the wheels seem too small, and the plastic nose gills are a little tacky. Anyway, enough of styling, which, after all, is only sheet metal deep. Our Celica was a GTS model, the next best thing to a top-of-the-line four-wheel drive turbo. Just so your neighbors don't think you're driving an ordinary Celica, it has bulging rear wheel arches and a substantial rear deck spoiler to identify it. Like so many of these sporty coupes, the hatchback is a heavy, bulky affair, and it's no easy task to raise it for loading purposes. It's powered by a wonderfully free-revving 2.2-litre, 130-horsepower, 16-valve engine, and it seems to have surprising punch. You could easily be fooled into thinking it was a V6, although most of the power does come in at fairly high revs. Our test car was fitted with a slick shifting 5-speed gearbox. In this form, the car will record about 9 litres per 100 kilometres in all-around driving. The car should hit 100 kilometres per hour in about 8 seconds or so, but hard acceleration in the wet makes the front wheels scrabble madly for grip. The Dunlop SB Sport tyres were fine in dry conditions, so maybe the car needs all-season high-performance rubber. The cockpit is a mixture of good and bad, mostly good. Instrumentation is great, and the heater panel is a model of its type and so easy to reach. The rear seats are really tiny, and it's hard to throw the bags and coats I mentioned earlier back there because the headrests get in the way. The front seats are marvelous and have power lumbar and side bolster adjustment. Sad to say, they don't return to their preset positions when you've tilted them to get in the back. For some strange reason, Toyota chose to fit a steering column that jumps out of the way when you take out the ignition key so you can get out easier. When you set off again, the darn thing has to be pulled back into position. This is the sort of gadget I associate with Cadillac or Lincoln, makes that have more than their share of corpulent owners. Surely the average Celica owner is a fit and slender squash-playing type who doesn't need this irritating device. Still, once inside, the car is terrific, and it goes and handles like a top-line sports coupe should. It stops too, with hefty four-wheel disc brakes, getting the job done very well indeed. After a week or so with a Celica, I was even thinking about the joys of owning one, especially with the killer sound system our GTS had. The stereo has a compact disc player included, and no less than 10 speakers filled the cabin with concert hall sound. Interestingly, Toyota has actually fitted a proper CD storage rack, something I thought car makers would take years to get around to. Unfortunately, the price tag is higher than it should be in what is one of the most competitive of all market slots. Our GTS stick it out at nearly $25,000, although you can get into a basic ST model for $17,500 or so. The new Celica will struggle for younger upscale buyers, along with a Nissan 240SX, Ford Probe, Honda Prelude, Eagle Talon, Chrysler Daytona, Mazda MX-6 and VW Corrado. Competition might also come from the Acura Integra hatchback, Honda Accord Coupe, Ford Mustang and the Chevrolet Camaro and Pontiac Firebird. Well, are you in love with this car styling, Ted?
In a word, no, but I'll get to that in a minute. I like everything about the car, actually. I think the engineering is first class. It handles well. I love the gearbox, and it's a comfortable car to drive. I got no problem with that. And I got to take issue with you on that pop-up steering wheel. I think that's an excellent feature in this car. But in terms of styling, this thing is one of the ugliest cars I've ever clapped eyes on. I can't stand looking at it. It's horrible to look at.
Well, let's get this thing straight about the steering wheel. I don't mind it popping up. I just want to make the decision myself. I don't want it popping up on without my command.
Part of the problems with cars of this ilk is that you have the bolsters on the seat, and then the steering wheel comes down, and you have about that much room to get out of the car. And I've always complained about that ingress and egress. With this one, with the wheel popping up, I find it just getting in and out of snap, and which is I appreciate that. You know?
Well, it's very true, but I still stick by my comment, Rude, that it may be to some people that the squash playing types buy this car, the younger, sort of slim people and so on. I don't need that feature.
Well, I play squash, and I find getting in and out of this thing very, very difficult. Also, the styling. Now, why would Toyota take a perfectly good model like the last generation of Celica, which especially the coupe version, I thought was a really handsome car, and come up with this monstrosity? This is...
Well,
you know?
The last one was a great-looking car. It was a very nice. It was always a favourite of mine. But they're on this 4-year cycle. It seems to me now that every 4 years they turn these things over, and here we are with a new one. But I must say that the Celicas have always been a little bit different. They've never been run-of-the-mill cars. They never copied anybody.
That's right.
It doesn't look really like anybody else's coupe.
Well, they have been a bit idiosyncratic, it's true. But this one is just plain ugly. The worst part of the car, the front I could live with. The worst part of the car is the back. It looks like they got like 3/4 of the way through the car and sort of ran out of inspiration and just said, well, let's put some bulbous fenders on there or something.
Well, I can't agree with that.
It's uncoordinated.
It's got the latest styling trends around the world of this kind of wheel at each corner thing, like the Corrado, for example. The wheels are very close to the rear end of the car. And so, well, I mean, you know, there used to be big overhang at each end and so forth. Okay, well, let's wrap up here anyway about this one.
It's ugly.
Okay. Things we didn't like about the car: the rear seats, no room in them at all. Shouldn't really expect that on a car like this. Price was a little bit too high. Styling, an object of controversy, as I started out by saying. On the plus side, beautiful drivetrain, excellent ergonomics, and I like the styling.
And we'll be right back with a look at the